mental state when you were officiating basketball? Would you?
And I was trying to think, talking about that, I was trying to think of the opposing team, because I was thinking this opposing team was a factor in what happened, but that's not what I'm thinking about. Two different games. I was playing this team called Chicago State, which is another black team. And in that game, I made a foul call. And I come over to the bench to report it, and there was 4 guys sat right up in the balcony, right up there above the scores table. And I made my report, and I turned around, and you might not want to put this cussing on there, but they called you, "Hey, you yellow son of a," okay? And at that moment, I froze. I had my back to them. Now, I don't know which one of these guys said this. And as officials, you don't really want to get involved in this, okay? And so I took one more step forward and turned around real quick and looked, and this guy jumped up and said, "Yeah, I'm the one that said that." I said, "Thank you." And I went down there and got the AD and let him take care of this. Now, that's the way you should do that. A lot of officials don't do that, but that's the way you should do that. As far as the question you asked about the crowd, in your officials' rules, they should tell you how and what you should do about these situations. There are certain ways to do this. And Ernie and I always adhered to that. Now, I could have got bent out of shape over that, but that's not what my intent. My intent was for the guy to reveal himself, because I don't want to punish you for what he said. Now, I've seen officials do that. I've seen officials throw 8 and 10 people in a section out because he did not know who said what. And that's not the way you deal with it. So you let the AD, the game administration, they handle that. Then you go on about your business, because that can cause some repercussions, you getting involved. Because now you done got out of your refereeing mode, now it's being you, and it's going to be insulting in front of 3,000 and 4,000 people. So we always adhered to that kind of stuff. And yeah, you choose not to hear that. You got too many things to do on the basketball court to hear things like that. It just so happened there wasn't very many people in this gym, and what the man said, everybody heard. So a lot of that's covered up by the noise, and right. So in officiating, you're taught not to have the rabbit ears per se about things like that. Of course, you can't let something like that, a racial slur like that. And now in a high school basketball game, and this happened at West Muskingum High School, and West Muskingum was playing New Lexington, and it was a girls' game. And New Lexington had this little short guard that was pretty smooth. And this girl was trying to guard her, and she was having a problem with the guard, so she finally got frustrated. And she whacked her across the chest and didn't go for the ball. See, that's what you are trained in officiating. If the defensive person has to go for the ball, not for the person. You go for the person, then you're dealing with technical fouls, you're dealing with intentional fouls, and probably flagrant foul. Some flagrant fouls get you through a flagrant foul. As soon as you use the word flagrant, then somebody's leaving the game. And see, as a official, you don't really want to do this. So I chose to go intentional. That way, you get your 2 shots and you get the ball back. And this lady's not expelled from the game. So hopefully, things will cool down. Well, we go through this process of shooting this foul shot, put the ball back in play, come back down the floor maybe 3 minutes later, and different girl in the lane, 3-second call. I come up out of the 3-second call. Now, there's something to be said about 3-second calls, but anyhow, I come up out of there, and this guy, sitting with a bunch of guys, jumped right up in my face and said a cuss word right now. I don't remember what it was. I blowed my whistle, and it's time I give my timeout, which is now is a 3-second timeout. Officials done this before a 30-second timeout. We've done this for our own timeout. And the place got quiet. You could hear me walking up there. Well, that's how quiet it was, and there's 500 or 600 people in there watching this girls' game. And before I got there, the guy jumped up and said, I'm gone, don't worry about it. And he runs out the door. And I'm standing there looking at him, and Ernie's across the court hollering at me, hey, Paul, what do you want? Let's put the ball in play, let's go. I'm standing there thinking, this guy deprived me of going through my action. There's a certain procedure you got to go through for that, say. First you stop the game, you go up there and instruct the people at the table to find, the AD or the game administrator. This guy ran out the door on me. Now that's what pissed me off. We playing the game 2 minutes later and look up and he stick his head in the door, thinking I'm going to do something. So I just looked at him and laughed, just like we're doing now. So in those kind of situations, it doesn't pay for you to get personal about it. If it happens, you get it done and get going. And that's what Ernie was trying to tell me. I said, Ernie, the man pissed me off. He didn't let me go through my ritual I'm supposed to go through. Now here we are putting the game. Well, see, now some officials would charge a technical foul on the fan, and that's unfair to the home team or whatever team. That's unfair. That's nothing the team done. That's somebody in the audience. But they'd charge a technical foul. That's not the procedure. You go up and you stop the game and proceed to do what I was going to do, but this person just happened to run out of the gym, that's all. So yeah, you remember stuff like that. And,
speaking of stories like that, can you tell me about something that maybe happened in Springfield, Ohio, maybe with Sumner Kellerman?
Was Sumner Kellerman? Well, that was way back when I was married. Yes. There was 2 gentlemen lived over by the name of Alvy Kellerman and Henry Kellerman. And they were Henry Lett's uncles. Henry's dad called me up one time. He had a broken water line. This is how this come about. And I just happened not to be working. And I told him I'd come down there and fix it. I went down there in Morgan County and fixed his line. And I did. And out of that, we got to talking about these guys, Alvy Kellerman. I remember way back when I saw these guys one time at a Gillette reunion. And Sherman said, boy, I'd sure like to go over and see him. I said, you would? He said, yeah. He said, I'd like to go over and see him. They were his first cousins. I think, yeah, they were his first cousins. Now, wait a minute, there was Henry's uncles. So there was Henry's Henry's grandfather, Judson, I believe, had a sister and married a Kellerman. That's who these guys come out of. Now yeah, it makes, okay. They were Henry's uncles anyhow. And I called Sherman back a couple of days later and said, you think we ought to get Sumner to go over with us? He said, well, that'd be good. I said, I already talked to him. At this time, Sumner was 92 years old. All right? So I get Sherman. At the time was 72, I believe. I'm not quite sure on that age or on the other 2 Kellerman's age, but I do know Sumner was 92 because the reason why I know that is he belonged to our Masonic Lodge, and when he was 92 years old, we gave him a 50-year pen of belonging to the lodge, and it happened in that same year when we done this. So I'm 21 years old, 22 years old. Sherman's 72. Sumner's 92. I just forget how old Henry was at the time. I'd take him over there, and all the way over, I'm thinking, boy, I'm going to see Sumner's uncles. These guys were Sumner's uncles, too. I'm saying, man, these guys must be 100 years old. If Sumner's 92, I'm saying this to myself, and so we go over there. They were younger than Sumner. One was, if I remember, one was 88 and one was 86. Well, I'm telling you, I'm 21 years old, 22 years old. I'm the youngest one in this household. And man, I'll tell you, I heard some stuff. It was unbelievable to me, okay? I never even thought about anything about family history and stuff back in them days. But I just thought, well, I was one of the people that always respect their elders. I always thought I had that. When I was sitting around with my elders, I sat and listened. I didn't try to be smart or act cute or anything like that. And that's what I set up in this house, and I heard all this stuff, them talking about the family and carrying on. I said, gee, my name. But what I thought when I first went over is these guys was going to be older than Sumner. That's what I thought. And Henry probably told you a little bit of that story too, did he? But from my perspective, I wouldn't. This is what I remember about that. This Alvy Calvin was kind of well off. He'd had quite a bit of property. Somewhere involved in there, somebody was trying to buy some property from him, and he wouldn't sell it. They was actually trying to take it from him, I think. And I think he eventually sold it, but he got a big sum of money out of it. And that I don't remember what it was. I don't even know if they even, now that I think about it, I don't even think they even mentioned the figure, to tell you the truth. But they just said he got a big sum of money out of it. I think he was, these people was trying to buy it. Some kind of company was trying to buy it. I think it's like 6 or 8 years before he ever sold it to them. I think that's what it was. Now, Henry might have told you that part of it. I don't know. I don't remember all that part of it.
Well, where did you take him to? Where did you take Sumner to?
To Alvy Calvin's house, home.
And where did Alvy Calvin live?
He lived in Springfield, Ohio. Also, we went to Henry Calvin's house, which was a brother of Alvy, and he lived in Springfield. And that's where we was at, Springfield, Ohio.
The reason I restated that question, I wanted you to say that so the tape would pick it out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I knew it was Springfield, Ohio,
Yeah.
but I wanted you, because when we transcribe these tapes, we need to hear the question that I ask you so that we know what your answer
Yeah.
is referring to. So that was a real experience for you then. You think that may have got you started in becoming interested in your family history, listening to these old guys talk?
Well, yeah. I was always interested that way, even in my own family, when Dad and his brothers would get together. I was the one who was always sitting around while the rest of them was always out and playing. I was always the one sitting around and listening to that. And yeah, I was interested that way back in then. I mean, I didn't know what to do about it then. I just remember being there and interested in listening and talking, listening to some of the things they say until they run me away.
Where were most of your family buried?
Most of the Jeremiah's sons are buried in the Chesterhill Cemetery. We're trying to find out where Uncle Nate come back from Michigan. He died here in Zanesville in 1937, I think it was. He died before my grandfather did. And I thought he was buried in that Chesterhill Cemetery, but we went down there and looked and we couldn't find his gravestone. And he's either buried up there in Zanesville or down at Multicultural Cemetery. But he come back from Michigan, that's where I think Tom and Clark and about 4 or 5 of them brothers buried down there in Chesterhill Cemetery. And then plus Jeremiah is buried there. And my grandpa George is buried there.
Do you have any family buried here in Zanesville?
Yes, my mother and father's here in Green Lawn Cemetery. That's old 40 coming out of Zanesville East. There's quite a bit of my mom's family buried in Zanesville in both cemeteries, and the one she's in, the one out there by Grover Cleveland High School, that's Woodlawn. A lot of the family's buried in there, in my mom's side of the family.
I'm going to switch the topic again. And did any of your family go into Canada?
Not that I know of. The only thing I can say about that is this cousin Irie had come down and visit us from some time. When my brother Gordy found him, he was way, you had to go clear up from the top of Michigan, go across that Mackinac Bridge, or Mackinac, whatever they call it, and he went back to the east. He come back southeast. I never can think of the name of that little town. And that's, as far as I know, that's the closest as anybody in my family been to Canada.
Okay. Were there any stories about the Underground Railroad?
You know, that's funny. For some reason or another, I wasn't interested in the Underground Railroad. That's funny to say that, ain't it? But I wasn't interested in it. So I can't answer that question. I don't.
Okay. You ever hear anyone being in slavery?
Yes. We had a story about our great-grandfather, Stoniker, being the son of a slave master.
Was the slave master his father?
Yeah.
And do you know who the slave master's last name might have been?
His name was Stoniker. That's how he got his last name. And they were in Elkins, West Virginia.
What's the name of the place?
Elkins.
And what kind of story did you hear about?
Okay, the story about that is this slave master had Ed by a slave woman. He was in some kind of financial trouble, so he brought the woman and the boy over to Blennerhassett Island. He knew this guy that owned this island over, and he knew him, and they were named Lord Blennerhassett. He's from England. And he had a slave there by the name Micah Jaw or Macaja, or however you pronounce that name, Phillips. And this fellow run the ferry for him back and forth across the river. And this woman and baby was put in his charge. And his story was he wasn't financially well. He had a problem, and when he got done, get this problem straightened around, and he'd be back and get him. But of course, he never ever come back and get him. And in the meantime, the war was over, and they were set free. So this Macaja Phillips ended up marrying this woman, and they moved up around Waterford, Ohio, Watertown. Well, Waterford, I think Watertown was a township, wasn't it? Okay, and that's where they moved up. Now, this boy, Ed Stoniker, gets up about 12, 14 years old, and there's a fire in the house, and it burned his mother up. And Macaja, meantime, died, and he was like 125 years old. I think he's buried right there close to Paulie Stevens' house on that road right there, up in a field, and I think he's buried between two of his wives. There was a grave on each side of it. Now, I can vaguely remember in my mind my older brothers telling the story that Grandma used to go down at that grave to her grandfather's. That's what they called him, their grandfather. So they would go down there periodically. But now, back to Ed. Ed was about 12, 14 years old when this happened. And he left there and went over to Chesterhill, and some male guy raised him up. I can't tell you what the name is right now. Raised him up, and he got up old enough to get married, and he married a lady named Jenny Cook. And had all these children. And that's my grandma was Stoniker. She married George, and she had worked in the house for Jeremiah.
Okay. I'm Grandma's first name again was?
Jessie Stoniker.
Jessie, okay. All right.
She had a twin sister named Blanche. And Wilbur Norman's mother was named Rose. She was the baby.
Whatever happened to Ed?
Ed died in Frank Norman's house. He was living there when he died. Now, that was Wilbur's dad. So he was staying with them when he died.
Do you know anything about Payne's Crossing?
Not much. Not much about that. What I know about that is probably ain't even worth talking about, but just passing through it, going to a little Norman cemetery. Some lady sent Wilbur some information from out in Indiana, that was out of that line of the Normans buried down there. And being working in a telephone company, I'd been past this place many times, this Payne cemetery I'm talking about right now. And I never knowed that was a black cemetery. But I went past it in a telephone truck many times going down there to work. And I can remember that. And when Wilbur showed me this piece of paper, and I seen marked on there Payne Cemetery, I said, well, Wilbur, I know where it's at. He said, you do? I said, yeah, I went past when I was working in a telephone company many times. I said, according to what this says about this Norman Cemetery, I know where that road's at. It turns down there. Well, he liked that, you know. And so we took off down there. I took him down to it, and then it was on private land. We just happened to be turning on this road where it's at, and the guy walked out of the house. And we asked him about it. He said, well, yeah, it's right up on top of that hill. He says, it's on our property now. We asked him if it was all right for us to go up in there. He said, yeah, so we did. We got up there so far you couldn't drive no more, so we had to walk up on top of that hill. And if I remember right, it's about 15 gravestones in there or something like that, 12, 15 up. And that's where this Granderson Norman was buried. Well, see, he knew Normans had been down in there, and this lady had sent him this information. So this is how Wilbur and I get hooked up in another trip. We go down there and roll right on down the road to a little place called Carbon Hill. You probably know where it's at, Carbon Hill. Well, we worked right there too. There's a big cemetery in there. And do you remember, you remember that cemetery is at? Right there in Carbon Hill?
No, I don't.
There's a big cemetery right in there.
I know the one you're talking about, though.
Okay. Right across from that cemetery, there's a lady that owned a store over there. Okay? On these papers that Wilbur had, some Norman woman owned quite a bit of acreage right there where that store sat, back up the road where we come in there. That's another thing we was looking at. This Norman lady owned all this right in here.
Do you know what happened to the Norman people that owned that property?
No, I don't know what happened. That's.
And do you know the name of the woman who sent Wilbur the paper from Indiana?
I couldn't tell you that name either. I think she's still living too. She's.
Would Wilbur know?
Well, I think he would know. Yeah. She lived in the southern part of Indiana. Like maybe. We was looking at on a map one time, and it looked like it might be 100, 120 miles from Cincinnati. And we were straight west of Cincinnati. So where she described where she lived at, and we found it on a map and was looking at it. I think the reason why we was looking at it, she'd extended the invitation for Wilbur to come out there, but it's hard to get Wilbur to go places anymore, that is.
Right. You two spent a lot of time together, sounds like.
Yeah, just like we're brothers. Me and him, my oldest living brother at the time, Pete.
Now, you and Wilbur are not brothers, though.
No, Wilbur's my dad's first cousin. See, he's in a different generation than we are. But my brother's his age, and I had a brother older than him. But he was in my dad's generation. And see, that's another thing about generations. Some people, when they're younger, they act older. And I found that out. When I tell people I'm 65 years old, and they say, there's no way you can be 65. Yes, I am. You don't act that because I'm in a younger generation. And a lot of people are. And then I'm in an older generation, a lot of people are, and they still act older than me. But, I mean, that's kind of on a jokey side there, but I think you find that out in genealogy, too. Well, no wonder I'm so much different. This person is 65 years. I'm in an older generation he is. I come from his dad's generation, not from his. Now, I don't know if people look at that like that, but Wilbur and Pete and I had looked at that like that. Well, how come this guy acted like he was older? And then you look in the generations and you see, it may answer the question for you. Could have been around more older people. See? Act your age, son.
We've heard that a lot, haven't we?
Yes.
Let me just check one thing here, because I know I've kept you way beyond. I just want to talk about organizations. You mentioned a couple, the Masonic Lodge that black people belong to. in your generation or that you know of in your family?
Prince Hall, Masonic Lodge. I guess I need to distinguish that from Masonic Lodge because I went in, I belonged to a thing what they called Pythagoreans. In them days they called it a junior Mason. And I had no ideas in my head at the time to join the Masons. Of course, I was only about 14, 15 years old when I'd done that. You know, it was a thing to join, like you join the Boy Scouts or something like that there. I never was interested in Boy Scouts, but so I joined this thing. I was in till I was old enough you couldn't belong to it no more. I think at the time was 18, I think. And then in them days, you couldn't join the Mason unless you're 21. Well, I wasn't really going to do that until I found out my brother Pete was and my dad was. I never knowed that, you know, until I got up and pretty close to 20 years old. And my dad and brother Pete were known all over the state for masonry. I said, my goodness, I didn't know this about my dad and my brother. So I joined the Masons because I belonged to Pythagoreans and because my brother and my dad was in there and they were known statewide. I got into Masons. I mean, I went to the examinations and all that there, but I got into Masons. Well, Masonry was interesting to me. It really was. I was 21 years old when I went in. I'm 65 now. I'm coming close to getting the 50-year pin in this thing. I never elected to join the upper houses of Masonry. And for this reason. When I joined the Masons, I was meeting once a month, and then I joined what they call the chapter house, which is once a month. And the more houses that you join in Masonry, the more monthly meetings. Then some of these places were away from Zanesville, and like in Columbus, you'd have to go to Columbus to join a certain house, or somewhere else. And I know that I wasn't going to participate. And I wasn't a person to join something that I wasn't going to participate in. So I knew I wasn't going to participate in them upper houses of Masonry, so that's why I never joined them. And I didn't. But and then after we had what they call a chapter house, they call it a red house of Masonry. The beginning levels is called the blue house of Masonry. Our chapter didn't function anymore. So I never went more than 7 degrees in Masonry. But I become proficient in the first 3 degrees. I got to where I didn't have to have a book or anything. I could, you know, initiate somebody in Masonry from the first 3 degrees. And this all come out of the Bible. You'd have to get a Masonic Bible to understand this. But it's in the Bible, which you would never know that by reading the Bible. You probably see on television about these codes and things in the Bible. We know that years ago. How about that? Yep. I become the worship master. I went through the chairs, and I was a worship master for about 4 or 5 years. You know, I'd done all that. It's a kind of a unique organization. I think people was kind of down on Masonry because they say it's a secret organization. Well, there's only certain things secret about Masonry, and that is, one of them is this: if you want to join the Masons, I'm not going to tell you about the degree that you're going to go through in your first 3 degrees, because that's not allowed. If I tell you that, then it's not going to surprise you when you come in there. But see, they're just like any other organization. You got what we call a worshipful master and a secretary, treasurer, and we run our business like anybody else does. The secret part of it is putting on these degrees. You don't put them on out in the street. You put them on in your lodge. Well, certain lodges have carried it beyond that, and it's given Masonry a stigma. I don't like that either. But yeah, Masonry's in trouble. They discovered in George Washington them day how the Masons were part of that plot, and there's a reason for that. They knew that Masons were sworn to secrecy, and they took advantage of that. So forbid you and I are brothers in Masonry, and I swear you to secrecy, and I go out here and do something that's against the law, then you can't testify against where you can't, so forth and so on. You can't talk about it. And they use that. And that's not what that was meant for at all. And a lot of that goes on today, and that's one of the big stigmas they put on masonry. And here I'm going up and coming up on pretty close to 50 years being in there. But on my part of it, I enjoyed the work and the initiations that went on. Yeah. They also try to say it's something that you're trying to get to heaven, you know. You're trying to supersede God. So they bring all this stuff in. But that's not what when I learned masonry, that's not what I learned. I didn't learn that kind of stuff. It makes me stop sometimes. Where'd this come from? I don't sound like the stuff I went through. Makes you kind of leery about that sometimes. So, you know, if I'm going to join an organization in masonry, I don't know if I want to join that or not. And that's what you hear people say.
Were there other organizations for people of color to join?
Yeah, there were other organizations for people of color to join. There was an Elks Club. I never chose to join that because I know that I wasn't going to participate. That's what kept me out of a lot of organizations. I wasn't going to participate, and I just didn't want to join just to say I belong to Roadmasters. I never wanted to do that. So masonry, over the years, is that, and these referee clubs that you had to belong to do these things. This is probably the only thing I really belonged to. I went to churches, but I never belonged to any. There's a story about that too, but I don't choose to talk about that here.
Okay, we'll save that for another time then.
Yeah.
What do you refer to yourself as your ethnic or your cultural, when you fill out application forms and whatnot? What did you put down as your race, say?
Well, since in Ohio, I don't think they have this anymore, but I'm going to say this, and I think I'm sure I'm right about this. I don't think they have color down there no more, like colored people. I think they have Negro, or maybe they don't even have that no more. Black, white, Hispanic, and all that. Whenever I feel anything out like that, I put black down. And I'm not real comfortable with that. I was more comfortable with the colored person. I am part of each one of them. And get to talking about these kind of things. There's a little Bible thing I like to quote. There's a little scripture in there that says, I am that I am, meaning you are who you are. So what's wrong with being who you are? If I'm half white and half colored, so be it. I need to be satisfied with that. See? And I have come to terms with that. I am that I am. That little scripture there said a lot of that for me. I remember being a Bible studier for years. I remember first encountering that. What in the world does that mean? I am that I am. Now, I'm not saying that I'm Jesus Christ. I mean, that's what he said. I am that I am. They asked him that question. Well, who are you? I am that I am. I used to marvel over that. What's that mean, I am that I am? And guess what? Another passage of scripture comes to mind. You learn a little here, a little there. And I can't remember what the rest of it says, but when you study that scripture, it took me till probably I was 45 years old to understand what I am that I am meant. And that means who you are is who you are. And so, is there something wrong with being who you are? Of course, you know, people obviously believe that. There is something wrong with being who you are. So, yeah, that made me come to terms with myself, that little scripture right there. I can't change who I am. I got to be who I am. And so, in certain situations, I sound like I'm a white man. In other situations, I sound like I'm a black man. I'm the guy in between. That's who I am. I can get along with the black man, and I can get along with the white man. The white man has trouble getting along with the black man, and the black man has trouble getting along with the white man. Now, that's the way it used to be. It's not so much like that now. But I was the guy in between. And you know, some people in them days were clever enough to use that. What I mean, to use me as a colored person. For instance, a couple of things that happened in Zanesville, and that's the way they got it done. We'll go to the top colored person in Zanesville, and we'll see if we can't get this done. That's what I'm talking about. They sometimes, if you don't watch out, they use you. And same thing on the black side of it. Let's go to him, and we might get this done. Now, in some cases, that's all right. But what I'm talking about here, it wasn't all right. But I'm not going to mention what I'm talking about neither, but yeah, I'm the guy that's in between. I'm the guy that's got what they used to call a high yellow skin. I got the blue eyes. And I'm in between. I can primarily get along with anybody. So, yeah, I've had that in my lifetime too. But I can remember a time I had a problem with being who I was because I didn't know. So yeah, that's I am that I am. That kind of straightened that out for me.
I want to throw another curve at you. How about do you have Native American heritage?
Well, you know, that's told in our family. We got that Native American, but on the Meyers and Simpson side, we don't find that. We haven't found it yet. And my grandmother and her twin sister, if they didn't look like Indians, nobody did. But somewhere in there, there's Indian. We haven't found that yet. And Ben's, she was a Stoniker. It may be on the Stoniker side. But on the Meyers and Simpson side of it, we can't find it. So at this point, I stand as biracial, not triracial. And if I find that, I don't have a problem being triracial.
Is there anything you'd like to share with us that we haven't covered, or something that you'd like us to know about you and your life, your family?
Well, I think I've shared everything here. I don't know really right offhand anything else. I remember, yeah, here's one little thing I'd share with you about anger, what anger can do to you. There's certain things that happened in my marriage that I wasn't used to. I come from a family, I never seen my mother and father argue. It didn't exist. I asked my older brothers that. You ever seen mom and dad argue? Never happened. Okay, I get out of this and I go get married. All I'm in is an arguing situation. I'm not used to this. This made me sick. What's happening here? Anyhow, I'm not used to this. I seen them do some things that was what I was considered not right. And I wasn't brought up that way. My dad didn't argue with my mom. So that got inbred in us boys. We ended up having women that argue with us all the time. We didn't like that. Consequently, you get divorced. And you come out there and you're angry. All right? Okay, you got to deal with this, because if you don't, it's going to tear you up. So I decided I'm going to deal with this. What happened? Let's back up here and say, what happened? And I had to come to this conclusion. You married the wrong person. That's what happened. And because it didn't work, now you're angry. Well, I had to come to the conclusion 2 or 3 years out of that divorce of that. I married the wrong woman. All the other years, I was convinced I did marry the right woman, say. But that's what happens. So you go out and you get out and you slander each other. She done this and he done that and so forth and so forth. I learned that that's not what happened. What happened was you two should never have got married. Just plain and simple. You need to accept that, get the anger out of you, and go on with your life. So I would say that. Now I'm just talking about marriage, But anger is one of them things that tear you up. You get so involved in something, then something goes wrong, and you're so angry that you might want to kick the doors down. You might take a gun to somebody. And then some of these things people say to you can make you angry pretty quick. You need to work on that yourself. Getting back to the basketball, you hear some people say some pretty mean things. You really do. And if you didn't adhere to what your rules book say, you could do some real damage, being you're in a spot of power. And so I would tell young folks that. You better learn to contain your anger. It'll get you in bigger problems you ever thought. That made me sick. I had stomach problems for years because of that. And here I am 40 years away from divorce, and I still got stomach problems. Still got that. So yeah, that's one little thing I'd add to the thing there. You don't deal in life with anger.
That's very good advice, and I think we all can learn from that.
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for your time. There's probably, we could go on with more questions, but don't want to wear you out because I want to get you to Chesterhill one day. So I want to thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.